gig tonight, convincing you guys why you want to be freed from the yoke of evil colonial oppression. I wonder if I can manage this. Okay, so Willard gave you so much vagary and so many lies about the British political system that my work is cut out in explaining exactly which different lies and which methods of subterfuge he used to lie to you. But I'm going to do that mainly in my rebuttal section. I'm then going to talk about, firstly, why British rule is not perfect, and if you've ever watched the news, or even caught it out of your peripheral vision and maybe heard a snatch of international news, you will know this is the case. Secondly, I'm going to talk about why independence matters, and I'm going to analyse that on a political level and kind of on a cultural symbolic level. But firstly, the most rebuttal in the world. Right. Okay, lie number one, Willard told you that in the UK you can always pass laws because the executive is the legislative. That's two different lies. The executive is nested within the legislative. So yes, we do have a slightly easier deal in attempting to pass parties, because normally our government has a really large mandate. It's like the biggest party. It can just kind of wipe the floor with the other parties and pass its votes. Imagine what would happen if the government wasn't composed of the single most powerful party. Imagine if you didn't have a full and complete mandate. Imagine if we had that right now, which is exactly what we have. We have a coalition government in the UK which does not have a simple, strong, complete mandate. It's having the hardest time ever in British history to get anything done, and it can barely tie its own shoelaces. So, firstly, the executive is not the same as the legislative. They haven't solved this problem of gridlock. Secondly, things can take a lot longer and be a lot harder to pass in the UK because we have a greater variety of criticisms, moments when the public can dissent and get annoyed with its political representatives and attempt to recall them. There are actually way more efficient methods for that in the UK. So these guys are not going to get stuff done any easier. No, thank you. The other thing is that getting stuff passed is the key to credibility. Well, I do not buy that logic. If a communist dictatorship can pass all the legislation that it wants, that's not legitimate. That's no more credible. We need some more sophisticated metrics of what is credible, and I'm going to tell you that having a mandate is usually credible. Having public support is credible. So, if your elected politicians can't agree on something and there's gridlock as a result of people representing their constituents and other people representing their constituents, all you have is two different people with two different interests, and they're being represented, and together they can form a compromise. If they were to ignore both of those interest groups, that is the less democratic option, and that's what these guys want to give you. They also, no thanks, they said once you have British politics, you guys are going to have a third option. That's hilarious because we have three parties, but I struggle to find one person in this room who wants to vote for any of my politicians. I don't want to, and I'm going to guess I'm about 6 times more to the left of the political spectrum than most of you guys are. Our political spectrum is entirely different. If you import the structures which have produced that system, you get a hilarious clash between two systems of thought that are utterly uncombinable. They are so incompatible, and that's another one of my substantive points later on. Okay, they also said, what's wrong with UK government? The only reason that Middle Easterners get annoyed with the UK is because they think they're Americans. They see us and they see our bad teeth and our pasty skin, and they think, those are probably Americans, so I'm going to shoot them. Firstly, these nations who have been cruelly invaded by our country that has so little regard for their inherent rights to self-determination are angry because they're being shot at, angry because they're being bombed, and angry because their political rights are being disregarded. That happens very easily under the British system. I'm going to argue maybe more easily because there are fewer people who object to spending money on wars, and I think that that's also a feature that is produced and helped and incentivised by our political system. So again, that's what these guys want to import along with their system. And okay, so firstly, on to why British rule is not perfect. Yes.
Is it fair to characterise this debate as a value judgment over which is better, a system which produces nothing and therefore no one's mandate is carried out, or a system which produces something which around half the electorate don't like? Something versus nothing, is that a fair characterisation?
Okay, murderous something or slightly passive nothing. I think it is a little bit more complicated than that, but also I don't buy your argument that absolutely nothing is going on in the US right now. There is so much gridlock and so much legislation that is really struggling to be passed. But acts are still ratified, things are still going through, and the debate is there, and that's where change happens. It's when people are like, why are we struggling to make change? We need new methods. If anything, that galvanises more people to further action. So briefly on why British rule isn't perfect. Right, Willard told you that Congress should be more powerful, and he told you, like, the House of Lords can always pass the laws that it wants to. It can't. Which brings me on to secondly, what kind of head of state do you want? Because he said that the Queen is awesome, which she is. I'm not going to argue against that, don't worry. What kind of head of state do you want? You want an apolitical, disinterested person who's never had to, like, fight for their position and get elected. Right, that's problematic in so many ways. Firstly, all she does is sign laws. She literally sits there